And it doesn't feel like everything is laden with metaphor. Like sometimes it just feels like the description of the act and the way of thinking about the act is as important as being like, well, wink, wink, this stands for, Catholic guilt washing away, or like, haha, look at how smart I am. Like it doesn't do that. It's just very flat.
Hey, welcome back to the Big Book Project. I'm really happy to have with me today Chad Post. Chad is publisher of Open Letter Books and a professor at University of Rochester. And I hope, a big fan of The Skull of Night by Karl Ove Knausgaard, which we are reading as our big group read. Currently, we're just going to talk about up through page 145 today, the first 2 weeks of reading. Hey, Chad.
Hey, thanks for having me. And yes, I'm a fan.
I'm glad. How much Knausgård? So, did you read My Struggle? And if so, did you get through all 6 volumes?
Yep. Yep. I actually wrote a long post on the 3% blog when it was on the University of Rochester website and was a blog about finishing that whole series. I would have finished it. It was during the early pandemic. And this is true for all of his books. So I've read everything except for the essays, the book on soccer, and then the seasonal quartet. I haven't read those yet, but I've read the My Struggle, all 6 volumes. I've read all 4 volumes of this like Third Realm series or whatever it's being called. And I've read A Time for Everything, which I think is absolutely spectacular. So I guess maybe it was easier to say what I have read than what I haven't. But like I've read basically everything. But what's true for this book and for almost all of his books to date is I've primarily listened to them. I've listened to the audiobooks of almost every single one of his books, especially the My Struggle, because the reader for that, Eduardo Ballesteri, I think is his name. He's an actor. So perfect as a reader and as a voice for those books for that character that was how I heard it when I was trying to read the books on page, and I just ended up listening to the audiobooks almost completely, and that was true for this as well. Like I really enjoy hearing them. I enjoy being immersed in it. I really like his writing, but I do also really appreciate what they've done with the audiobooks and find them like absolutely gripping.
Do you have, since you are practically a Knausgård completist, do you have a favorite so far?
The 6th volume of my struggle, where he talks about reading Mein Kampf, I find to be philosophically very interesting. Like I think that that's really unique and cool, and I like reading that, and I like reading about his struggle, reading my struggle about everything that's going on in Norway. I think that's really interesting. I think that A Time for Everything still stood out as my absolute like favorite single volume. But these books that are part of the series, each one of them, I fall into immediately and just devour when they come out. Like just devour them. And I love them. And I don't know that I have a favorite among them because in some ways, even though they have, for the most part, they don't really overlap that much. Like there's little bits and pieces that overlap and some of the characters sort of recur, but it's not like you're reading like volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, volume 4 and they're all pieced together yet. Nevertheless, they're a little bit slippery in my mind as to like which things happened where. But as a whole, I've really enjoyed it, and the parts involving the death metal Satan worship parts are my favorite. And I think those are in volumes 1 and 3 for the most part. But I might be misremembering that.
Yeah, I think I heard someone talk about this series where the Skull of Night is, and then we've got the Third Realm, the Wolves of Eternity, and the Morning Star, right?
Morning Star. Yeah, that's what it
Um,
is. The Morning Star trilogy, not the third
I
or Sextet or whatever.
Well, but I think that people are sometimes referring to them, and maybe he is too, as a constellation of books,
That makes sense.
which is kind of double entendre, I guess, because there is something going on in the heavenly skies in all of these books. But um, it is a really interesting uh, construct, and I'm wondering, I think there are two more left to be published in English.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they're going to tie these pieces up a little bit tighter. Do you know anything about that, or have you heard
On
anything?
the Reddit threads about this, or the subreddits about this, I feel like there's someone who's read them all who said, "Oh, we're before this before someone on the subreddit was going to start reading this one, they said, "Do I need to review everything from before? I've just, went and looked through and tried to recall the names of everyone to put this together so I know what's going to happen." And someone was like, "Haha, very funny. You won't need that until the last volume." But then I wasn't sure if they were being
Okay.
serious or if they were like, maybe at the last volume they all tie together. It wasn't like expounded upon in any way, but I don't think that the next one really directly segues into anything either. But it'll be interesting to see at the end, like that the characters that recur and what their stories are will be cool. And then the motifs, or how you can see each one of these books sort of in space, like you're saying, as a constellation, or in time, because they're at different points throughout history. Like that second, is it the second one that has a lot to do with like Soviet Union period and is a little bit earlier than the Morning Star one? They are throughout like a scope of time as well. And to be able to see what it looks like as a whole, I think will be really interesting. But I have a really strong suspicion that they're not going to like sum up into some neat, like, here's an event that happened. And even though there's the star, there isn't going to be one thing that like brings everyone together and snaps it into place. I don't think that would be,
Yeah.
if it does, I'd be kind of disappointed, to be, in fact.
This is the first one that I've read of this constellation.
Oh,
And
very
as you
interesting.
know, I am just at the point where we are on our reading schedule. So page
Oh my gosh.
145 and not beyond. And then the only other Knausgåard that I read and I loved it was volume 2 of My Struggle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I plugged myself into that one because somewhere I read it was like about his early marriage and about relationships. And to me at the time that just sounded more interesting than maybe something about his, growing up. But I do have that volume 6 and I think that is definitely going to be like my next read of his because unless I just go and devour the 3 previously published books in this constellation, but I'm excited about volume 6 of My Struggle.
They all of them have like one thing in common, is that the structures are so important and tend to be a little glacial, in the sense that like this is broken up into 3 parts perhaps. Am I right? You have it in front of you. I had to find a Kindle version because I did listen to it, so to review where we were up to 145, I have a Kindle version so I can't flip through. But I think there's 3 parts to it. uh and
I
they
think
do
there's
fit.
4 actually.
There's a fourth one. Okay, that makes sense too. But they fit together in a certain way. And like My Struggle, each one of those books, people complain. It's both like what he's praised for and what he's criticized for, of everything being so exacting and laborious. Like you go and wash the dishes, it describes washing the dishes, all those kind of bits and pieces to it. And on a line by line level, I can see that, but I want to come back to that as an idea first in a second. But as a whole, as you read it, it ends on these parts and it moves, like something changes, something like shifts in terms of the focus, the point of view, the space of which the character's consciousness is inhabiting, the way that they're building information, or the way he builds information. And I find that to be really fascinating. And like any one of his books will have that element to it. And every one of them I think is gratifying on that level. And in terms of like people's criticisms of like the slowness, the pacing, the sort of like laborious nature of bit by bit by bit, I actually think that that's what makes these really good audiobooks. Is that even with this one, going through it, I was like, I heard it, I can hear it all in my head. And what you hear is like that a Christian's thinking step by step by step, his thinking, and you're along with him. And for most of the book, it's like, yes, I can see where you're going, where you're going, where you're going. And then when he makes a decision or does something is when his character's created. When it's like a decision you wouldn't have made. He's either super narcissistic or he does something like sort of off the wall or has a certain reaction to things. But as a reader, you're like in next to him in this way that I find very curious as character building. It isn't the like boring nature of it that matters. Like it does describe a lot of stuff, but those descriptions really do seem to follow like how a thought pattern can go, and it can construct something there. And it is in those like moments of like veering off or doing something where like I would get anxious listening to it and just be like, oh buddy, bad idea, bad idea,
No,
don't get the
don't
cat.
cook that cat. Don't cook that cat. It's gonna be really smelly.
It's gonna smell awful. There's no way around it. But yeah, I don't know how much you recap on here, but the cat thing is like
No, we can definitely recap. I, I'm just so curious though, because especially with the My Struggle series, maybe a little bit less so with the School of Night, but the things that, like you said, like doing the dishes, the things that he's describing should not be interesting. But there's
right.
some kind of way that this guy writes. There's some special sauce here. Have you ever been able to articulate like what it is that makes it addictive?
Here's the best that I can do, and it's from this section. And I was thinking about it this morning when I was reviewing this. Is the organizing of the albums. So when he's organizing his albums, he's like, this has to come after this. He's like putting them in an order that's like curatorial and like involves some sort of larger message as to like, I think the one in the specific instance that he or like example that he points to in here is the cure. Is he's like, well, I'm going to put the cure here because people assume the cure is like very moody, but they're not. They also have this brightness. So putting it here next to this will then emphasize that part to it. And that is boring as shit. Like if you could say if there are two things that like any man will talk about that you should just flee, one is their record collection and the other is their fantasy sports team. Just go away and come back hours later and it'll be okay. But like that should be absolutely the worst. But again, it's the fact that he thinks through why. The way that the character and the mind, the consciousness of the book is explaining why is what makes that character function. Like, you know, then without even having to say like he is this way or he's that way or he acts like this, like you don't even have to do that. It's like in that, it's in those decisions and those micro decisions and the idea of putting things in this order that becomes the unique voice of that character. And that trick, I don't know that there's a way that you can explain it, but you see people that are lesser writers, um, uh, shots at Ben Lerner, that can't do this, that want desperately to be able to articulate this kind of like almost auto-fictional self that becomes something more and more interesting than what it would be on the page. But that part, I don't know how he does that exactly, aside from the fact that these are very direct sentences, very simplified, and does just like let you follow a train of thought without it being overly crafted or pretentious feeling. It feels natural, it feels organic. And that's the trick that nobody can really capture in the same way.
Yeah, but don't you think though that it's a product of Knausgaard's own mind? Like I kind of think that he thinks in this very like deliberate, systematized way about everything he does. Like doing the dishes for him is probably not just doing the dishes, but oh, while the water is still relatively clean and not cloudy, I need to do all of the water glasses first, and this is
Yeah.
how I'm going to scrub. I mean, it seems like I get the sense that he's not a very impulsive or impromptu guy. Like everything is very deliberative and thought through. Like he just doesn't do something. It really is thoughtful.
And it doesn't feel like everything is laden with metaphor. Like sometimes it just feels like the description of the act and the way of thinking about the act is as important as being like, well, wink wink, this stands for, you know, Catholic guilt washing away, or like, haha, look at how smart I am. Like it doesn't do that. It's just very flat. Like it's very like unadorned on so many levels. And yet that makes it really interesting. Like when we have the encounter with Vivian and Hans at the club in this section, like in many ways, like, yeah, if I don't, you know, the ideas of reading about some guy going to a bar sad about his like being sort of rejected for his photos and then seeing some kids and hanging out and talking pretentiously about a play, that's not going to fly with most people. But in this, it does work because it is sort of like, well, it's just that. it's not even like, it's not creating this grand, like, isn't this a good synecdoche for like the greater world at large? It doesn't keep layering that. And I feel like lesser authors that are working within a semi-similar aesthetic of like the micro observation, the micro movement, the like sort of overheaping of details to give you the reality. I don't think that they're as casual about it. They all feel like they have a little bit more like, don't you see what I'm saying to them? And I don't, the trick with him seems to be that he doesn't do that. And yet it just accumulates meaning and meaning and meaning and meaning and meaning and builds up to something that ends up being like very, as I'm certain you already know, part of this becomes very much like a framework that we're familiar with and a myth and a story that we're familiar with and how that has played out. But it doesn't have to be like beaten over the head. And some of, I mean, you could argue against me and say like the Marlowe stuff is constant in here. And so like he is saying again and again, like, Marlowe, hello, like we
Yeah.
can pay attention to this. But at the same time, it doesn't, I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't feel, by just being blatant about it, it feels also less like, look at me, I'm a smart author here. And any of the imitators of this style that I've run into, if they have that vibe to them, I don't like them. I'm always turned off. And he does seem like, for all of his hair and like persona, he does seem to be like casually cool about this stuff and like just does the writing and doesn't like try and be some massive figure about things.
Yeah. Well, let's dig in. I don't know whether I was going to say let's psychoanalyze Christian, but my God, he's kind of a poster child for every kind of messed up, psychotic, narcissistic, self-involved complex you could probably think of.
I was thinking about that in terms of if he weren't part of a book, he would have like main character syndrome. Everyone's about him. Everything is about him. Every moment is like, how does it relate to him? What about how does he feel? He is so in his head in that way. And like Hans does talk about, I think it's Hans talks about the myth of Narcissus and like that element to his being of being so absorbed with his like sight of himself. But it really is just like that constant relating to like how it affects him, how it affects him, how it affects him. His sister's suicide attempt is basically like how I left my family because they weren't they weren't paying attention to me, sort of feeling. And it's just like so childish and so like young male going to be a superstar in the world. I should be the focal point. It's so that specific thing, and it is cringy, I guess, in a lot of ways, but also like I can see that. I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah. And
Here.
is there, I have understood that back to the My Struggle series, volume 6, that in that volume, I think there's a good deal of reflection by Knausgaard about kind of trying to incorporate family drama and trauma into his own art,
Yeah.
probably in much the same way that Christian is contemplating doing with this photography series.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's very true. I think it is in volume 6 that there is extended section about kind of the legality of having used people from his life and their anger about it and like saying, well, I didn't use their names. Like these people aren't the real names of the people that I was writing about. And it sort of like unveils that within there and becomes like more honest by saying what had happened with his writing. But he does have, as a character, as a voiced character, the narrator of My Struggle isn't that dissimilar from Christian in the sense of pulling in things from his life, but also pulling things back to himself over and over again. Like every element, like the thing with Stina, I think that's in our section where she's like takes him back to her house and he's just like, I don't want to see your kid. Like, no, I'm out of here. And then he sees her again and she's like, you're kind of an asshole. And he's basically like, why is she acting like this towards me? Like, this is like, why would you do that? That vibe is in My Struggle a lot. Like that sort of like, clearly the reader is seeing you do something that's like not good and is going to have these repercussions, but you as a character don't see those repercussions. You're not evolved enough to see what we're seeing as the reader, which is another one of the tricks on why this works so well, is that we see these characters as flawed, but they don't see themselves as flawed generally. Or if they do, they see it in a specific way that isn't complete. And we can say, yeah, that's one issue, but you're also like doing these other things, like and acting in this way. And their fallibility is what makes them more interesting. And their inability to see the scope of those failings is also like what makes them work and what makes the book like have an engine. Because otherwise, like, what's happening here to keep you reading? Aside from like him wanting to be a famous photographer, like that's not a lot of like that's not to hang a 600-page book on, right? Like we've had many like, what do you call it? It's not a Bildungsroman, but the one where it's like becoming an artist.
Yeah, I
That
know. But
that
I can't think
term
of the word, but yeah.
that term of like that portrait of an artist as a young man, we've had millions of these of like the struggle of it, and it seems to have like it's setting up a certain trope. He's got some talent, he gets into school, he's rejected, but he's gonna fight through it because he's right, he's got the vision, and if he stays to his vision, to his North Star, he will then become this grand artist that everyone will recognize as genius. And that does play into like my struggle thing, but like he can't see how like weird and warped his view of the world is based on like his assumption that those things are going to happen, and we can. And that makes it interesting to read because you kind of either want to see, I don't know, maybe you feel differently. I was reading, as like kind of wanted to see him get his comeuppance at some level. Is like when he goes to see the visiting professor, visiting photographer, visiting artist for
Yeah.
the second time, and like goes and like he's been criticized for his art in class. He gets like just totally just demolished, and everyone's like, "Ooh, how do you feel?" And he's like, "I'm fine. I don't need it." He's like not as good as me, anyways.
He's
He
just a
doesn't
war
grow.
photographer.
He's just a war photographer. Who cares? And then he sees him and shows him the other stuff. The guy's still like, I don't know, man. It's just not light. There's just no life there. You should maybe be a journalist, a photojournalist. And it's so insulting. At that moment, I was like, good. Yeah, tell him. Yeah, he sucks. Tell him the truth. Like, I want to see him get injured that way, but then I also want to see him like react wildly. Or like react in some like self-concerted way, because it's almost like watching this slow motion train wreck, like continually slow motion train wreck of like as he's digging a further and further hole. The idea of stealing the cat, like it's, not to keep coming back to it, but he's convinced this is a great idea, and this is a terrible idea, and putting it into a pot to boil it, also a bad idea.
When you live in a communal space.
Anywhere. I'm not certain that's a good like sure if you're in the woods, maybe. I don't know. But just burning, like boiling a cat to like have it deflesh is like, no. We no. And granted, this takes place earlier in time. Now, if he'd seen like Breaking Bad, he'd have like all the acids, right?
Yeah.
In 2 seconds, it'd be no big deal. But yeah, I also love that like immediately when someone's like, "What's that smell?" He's like, "Old woman upstairs." Like, must be.
Right. Right. So, what is this guy's problem though? Is it that Christian? Is it that he just like totally lacks empathy? Is he a misanthrope? Is he just so insecure that he can't absorb any kind of criticism about his person or his work?
Yeah, there's like part of what I'm thinking to respond to that involves stuff that you haven't read yet. So I'm gonna try
Okay.
and keep it away from that as much as possible. But I do think a part of it is that he can't believe that anything bad could happen to him. Or that that's not allowed on some level. Like that's not fair. Like he's talented, things should just work out for him on some level. They should always just work out, and it's not his fault. Like if things don't work out, it's not his fault. It's the fault of the world. Like he's special on some level. He's unique. He's got a vision. He's going to be an artist, and like anything that gets in the way or that like goes against that, it's that guy's a war photographer. He's not the right one to be judging him. Or it's like he's always pushing things off, and it's someone else's reasoning, or because of someone else, that things don't work out for him. And I think that, I don't know what you'd call that, like a narcissist, or whatever other terms there might be. um I feel like there's some new, like, dark narcissist term that gets advertised to me on Instagram all the time. Like, what are those kind of like new catchy phrases he probably fits a little bit better with than just the simple, run of the
Yeah.
mill thing. He's also like, he's willing to do whatever it takes to become important. And so far as like using his family in that way, like, feels gross, especially related to his sister and her suicide attempt. But he doesn't care. He'll use whatever it takes for him to be successful, him specifically. And anyone else, they're not that important to him. He's a
So
psychopath.
yeah, yeah. I think you're right, and that makes me think. I personally think that he would have reacted to the situation with his sister's suicide attempt the way that he did, regardless of whether or not she criticized his art before that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
he is thin skinned,
Hmm.
but I think that he's so mm, self-centered and selfish that he would have taken that opportunity if she had just praised everything that she saw in his photography and his whole concept of himself prior to her attempt. I don't think it would have mattered to him.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. Yeah, he would use anything.
So we kind of get a sense of where the title for this book came about in this section with this weird group that Christopher Marlowe belonged
Hmm.
to, which I take at the time was called the School of Atheism or the School of Atheists. And then later on, it became known as the School of Night. But these guys started meeting, I guess, in 1592 in London, and it was a lot of luminaries at the time, including Marlowe.
Yeah. Yes. I'm looking at that same part because I do remember this, but I do not remember all the details of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that we just kind of went through the fact that Knausgaard doesn't really try to hit you over the head with metaphor and like, oh, this is like, seven different ways to tell you where I'm coming from. But it it does strike the ironic that you've got the School of Night, formerly the School of Atheism, as the title of the book, and then it's the main character's name is Kristian.
Yeah.
um so I think I don't see any evidence so far in 145 pages that Kristian was ever a capital C Christian in terms of faith or ethos. But I'm wondering if you've got any. I'm sure it gets back to the Dr. Faustus story and the whole issue about believing and not believing and selling your soul to the devil that I think is going to unfold. But I don't know. Do you think it's a little too cute that Knausgaard picked this name for his protagonist?
I mean, yeah. I mean, but isn't, for some reason, I always associate it with Newt Hampson, but I don't know why, and that's probably just wrong. I don't know why I have that in my head right now. But that is like, it is a little on the nose. At the same time, like, the Marlowe stuff is on the nose, which the Dr. Faustus stuff will be there. But like, if those are our main like coins of like this equals this is going to move in this way, it's not that bad to me because it is blatant. Like, it's not like, it doesn't build it up as if you're going to discover something and be like, oh wow, like, I didn't put this all together. It's basically like, Marlowe wrote a play called Dr. Faustus, and he was a group of people who were kind of atheists, but then had these beliefs about Christianity that are different. Like, just that's a thing that happened in the world, and you might want to know about that. Like,
Right.
is that too cute in that way? Because it's just kind of like straight up. But yeah, the Christian thing being the, yeah, with the devil and the God and the bartering of a Dr. Faustus, it is a little bit there, but like, I don't know. What do you? Yeah, I can't say too much
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
spoiling this for you.
Well, okay, I want to go a different route with you then. So, you're a professor of college students,
Yeah, and you did say
and
professor, and I just want to put that in quotes for anyone listening. It is a professor, quote unquote. I am not a doctorate. I am just a guy.
you teach students at the college level
Mhm.
that are pursuing professions in the arts, the writing and translating arts. In your specific case, I kind of have a degree of sympathy for Kristian in the criticism that he's getting for his photos. First there's Hans, who, he finds a way to dismiss because, oh, well, Hans isn't even an artist because what's this with the mechanical rats and the tortoises and stuff.
Yep.
Um, but then, the professor or the war photographer Figaro visits the class, and, everyone is telling him that his work is too full of or that the ideas around his work is too evident or too obvious, but there's no life in the work. And I kind of try to internalize this, like, what would I do with that criticism if I was a photographer? And I think it'd be really hard to translate into like what is it you like what is it you want? It's such a mushy kind of aesthetic thing.
Yeah, it's kind of, I do run into this problem with our students quite a bit. Like the students that are specifically working on translations, like a literary translation at a higher level, is that there is something to the being technically good at things and then having a feel for them. And it goes back to like the most basic ways, like that person has it and that other person does not have it. And sometimes you can't define what it is, but it is something about a spirit. There's something about the way that the work is written or the photograph is made that has a life to it. And then there are things that do not, that are technically there, but they just don't sing. They don't work. And I don't know how you ever describe that. Like I could try and talk around it and give pointers as to like where things start to feel too mechanical or too non-human or a-human and not really like alive. It's easy to say when it's lacking. It's hard to say how you insert that. But there is something about a person's connection and like the connection that they have to the work that starts to make it more alive, at least with writing. I think when they're not trying to like exactly pitch something and make it specifically in this way and they're just doing it, when they're there doing it and you can feel that, that's when it's alive. So like I've given criticisms like this to students like too many times, and it's never comfortable and it's never meant to be like totally belittling so much as like if you do, like read things, feel that, absorb that, see if you can replicate it by becoming an artist, by becoming a creative at this moment. You need to transform from taking your background knowledge and you need to make it into something that is lively, is has some extra something to it that makes it feel unique and not like replicable in like a normal way. And that sucks. Like I hate doing that. I really hate doing that. It's uncomfortable, but I feel like it is the difference between someone who is award winning, published, revered, read for many years, and someone who's like that was good, but it doesn't last. It just like feels like, oh yeah, that totally went through the motions. That did exactly what it's supposed to do. There's nothing wrong with it by any means, but it didn't have the same impact. And sometimes that impact is this like undefinable, almost spiritual aspect to it, which might play a little bit into this book in some regards. Got
So
mechanics versus life.
yeah, I think it does. And so without getting too personal about anyone that you've worked with, or even the generalities, I would think at this point, so far the only person that we've seen that has liked um Christian's photographs of is his mom. She said, "Oh, you're very talented."
And theoretically, the people who let him into the program.
Well, maybe, but I think he's being totally naive about that, because he keeps saying, like, "Well, I wouldn't be in this program if I weren't good," right? But of course, we all know that it's a numbers game, right, and a money
I
game,
mean,
and
right nowadays, especially, but I give a little credence to like back in what
okay,
this is
the
set in
good old days.
85.
85, yeah, 85.
Um, I was gonna say 84, but 85, yeah, 85. Like back, yeah, I would think that there's still like some rigor to like getting into an art school of that sort, but yeah, still you're gonna be like, yeah, you pass. That doesn't mean you're gonna be an artist. That but you can get into this class and maybe you develop and maybe you don't.
So Christian makes the point in this section that, to himself, of course, that maybe my colleagues that are in this course with me have more talent, but they don't have my ambition, and he says something about something is ill defined. I I kind of think that that's got to be true, because at this point, a lot of people in his position would have quit, right? Or they would have like pivoted. They would have gone into journalism or something. They would have tried to maybe go a direction that required some technical knowledge and skill, but not something that's got this artistic overlay to it.
But this is his first semester, correct? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I think. Well, I think when he comes back from Christmas break, right? It's his second semester.
Yeah, yeah. When he comes back, right, right. But it's his first
His
year
first year.
in the
Yeah.
school.
So here's the quote that I was looking for. Some of the other students were technically more gifted than me, but their personalities were ill-defined and ineffectual.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, he's obviously got more stamina to overcome all of these obstacles to making it than I think a lot of people would. And I guess that this ambition is what's going to hang him in the end.
I mean, there's the idea too that like with artists, like there's the art and then there is the artist. And like the that kind of idea of being an artist and embodying that and that being like it can overcome technical flaws, right? Like he may not be as technically good, but if you have the right persona and space and ambition and look and feel and all that kind of stuff, you could sort of overcome that theoretically. You just need to get the right break. You just need to go for it. You need to do whatever it takes to be able to get that first leg up, right? And then good things could happen for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's what he's waiting for, the break.
Maybe. Yeah, he can get his break. He's got the talent. He gets a break. He's on his path. He's got his what does he call it? His series that he wants to do with the skeletons and the structure of
Oh, yeah,
something like that.
it's structure, or yeah, something like that. So tell me what we should be making of Hans so far. He's kind of an enigma,
Uh-huh.
up until now. I think it's like, what is this guy's deal? He's from the Netherlands. He is hanging out in London. He's got this big studio, and he just always seems to be at the pub. Gave up photography, now makes this kind of, weird stuff. Seems to have an opinion about everything. Seems to be a fairly well-read guy, and I admire the translation, Martin Aiken is obviously like a fantastic translator, and I think he's done pretty much all of Knausgåard, right?
He did half of some of my struggle, but not all of
Okay.
them. Don Bartlett did some of them, and then I think he's
Okay.
done all of these books though.
But
He's
the
done a
one criticism that I would have, and I think that this is just coming from an American perspective, Kristian describes Hans initially as looking gormless, which
Oh, yeah, I saw
is
that in your post. Yeah.
gormless is definitely not a word that we use in the US, but I guess in the UK, I looked it up, it's something that they actually do say.
My assumption is that all these books are edited and done through the British side of things first,
Yeah,
and then come over here, and like how far they change any of that is anyone. I mean, someone could figure it out, but I don't think it's very much.
right.
I see
So,
into the efficiencies and the slash laziness of of Penguin and call
you
you on
well,
it.
and you would know more about how these translation things work than I do, but okay, so gormless I looked up and it means kind of like inept and kind of stupid, I guess.
Right, but I don't know that that's accurate. I For Hans, I think of Hans. Hans appears whenever he needs to, essentially. Like he just appears and shows him to the special secret party, right? He leads him places, and he shows him pathways. And he also, like with the mechanical things with the stuff, I mean he's essentially creating traps, right? He's using mechanics and logic to create certain systems that function within themselves. And like he's from the Netherlands too, which is very interesting, which I hadn't thought of until you just said it out loud. But that's very funny. In a way, a lot of things that are down, that are more base and more like structured. So I think that he's a weird figure, like totally, and seems that, I mean, he does appear, he just appears out of nowhere. He reminded me in the very first time that when he first appears when I was reading it, he reminds me of the opening of The Master and Margarita, and that might
Ah.
be a little bit heavy, or not a heavy-handed allusion, but like an allusion that might go too far, be too literary. But it did remind me of that. It reminded me very much of that, and that may or may not be intentional. But also, then he sort of just like, I liked him as like, he seemed nefarious on some level. He seemed untrustworthy and a liar. Like everything about him felt like there's a danger that appeared whenever Hans appears in the text, and that's exciting because otherwise Kristian is just like doodling along like a dipshit most of the time, doing like I'm gonna steal a cat, I'm gonna steal a dead cat, and make some pictures. Like he just does these things, but like when Hans appears, it feels like something could go real bad here. Like anything really bad could happen at any moment. I was always wary of him, but he felt like someone who's also like, he can lead Kristian, he can bring him into certain things. He's got access to something that Kristian doesn't have access to, like the play, and like Vivian and that whole group of the guy that he keeps seeing that shows up at this as part of this.
Yeah, the
Like
Egyptian
Hans is the
guy.
key to that. The Egyptian guy. Hans is the key to that. Hans is the one who can make that entry, open the door to those sort of places. And meanwhile is fooling around with a lot of mechanical stuff, which I think is like such a contrast from like photography as beauty and as capturing something in nature generally, even if it's like a staged thing. Most of the photography they're talking about is like more of observing, and with the mechanical stuff it's more of creating something that's going to run in a certain clockwork way,
Well,
which I think is a different form of art.
that's an interesting point that you brought up because I th- you're right how it seems that Hans's mind works in a very uh, process kind of oriented way, like, how do I get this rat from there to the end of the maze kind of thing. But he also seems to have this, I think I'm remembering correctly, the same criticism of Christian's photography that Figueroa, the photographer, does at the school. It's like, there's no life in these, it's just ideas.
I assume that that was in the book to reassure us that that's true. We can't see his art, and we may have a different subjective view of like whatever the pictures actually would be if we were able to see them. and that at least that makes it clear that there's at least someone else who says the same thing. There's a corroboration that his art is there, but it isn't there, which maybe meant to say more that that's who Kristian really is. That Kristian
Uh,
is doing all this. Kristian's active in in a way that he thinks things, he does things, he's moving, he's actively doing things for himself. But at his core, who is he? He's a guy that wants to be he's a kid who wants to be a photographer. Is that who he is? Is he alive? Is he what makes him him? Is maybe what that could end up sort of reflecting back on. But I took the two of those criticisms being fairly similar or in the same vein. It's just no, I'm not kidding. This is we're stuck in someone's head. This is unreliable, whatever. But it is real that his art at this moment in time is not great. And that if he's going to become an artist, he's working uphill.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Maybe.
I like that. That's a good point. We've got that validation, not just from a potentially unreliable source.
And also, he wants to impress these people. He acts like he doesn't, but he desperately wants to impress them. And if
Yes.
Hans were to say your art is good, that would be less meaningful than Hans being yo, no, not so good. That makes Hans you want you want him to say that you're good. You want him to
Yeah.
say that you're okay. He wants that validation on some level.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
agree. Well, Chad, I'm really happy that you agreed to come on and talk to me about the first 145 pages, because I can almost feel your frustration. Oh, but we just need a few more pages, and then there's a whole other thing we could be talking about. So,
Hey,
thank you for
it's great. It's great. I think you'll like the whole book, and I'm very excited to hear what you think as it go along too.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us, and thank you for checking in. I was so pleased when I heard from you when we picked this book, and really happy to have you on the show to talk about it. Oh, and
I
you're gonna do the
have
Mon with us
about
too.
this. Yeah, I bought a copy of it because I've never read this. I've only read Magic Mountain 25, 28 years ago, whatever it was, and I barely remember it. So, and I've never
Okay.
read this, and I wanted to, so I would.
All right, Chad. Thank you so much for joining us.